Thank you for joining a conversation about practicing the words, works, and ways of Jesus. I'm Steve Griffin, and this is Formation Through Following. Hey friends, let's continue our series on Anabaptist distinctives. As you may recall from last time, I am an Anabaptist by conviction, by choice. I was not born into this Christian persuasion. And maybe today you're thinking, well, what is an Anabaptist? And rather than give you some boring history lesson, I'll give you a boring theology lesson. But I think I would boil it down like this. Anabaptism focuses on graciously following Jesus in the way of peace by living out the Sermon on the Mount. And so the first distinctive, and I think attraction to Anabaptism, is a Jesus-centered theology, hermeneutics, and that's just a fancy word for interpreting Scripture, and Jesus-centered ethics. Jesus in Anabaptism is the highest and clearest revelation of God. There is no tension within the Godhead. I think so many Christians are they labor under a construct that behind Jesus there is this angry Father. You can see how that happens, why that type of thinking is so prevalent in Christianity. It's like the God of the Old Testament is mean and vicious, sometimes petty. And then you come to the New Testament, and Jesus seems kind and gracious and merciful, very loving. And so, as is often the case, Christian faith is presented as though Jesus has come to save us from God. Jesus comes to save us from the angry Father. This is not at all Jesus' understanding of his Father. And so within Anabaptism, there is no tension within the Godhead. Quite simply, we're saying God is like Jesus. God has always been like Jesus. And God will always be like Jesus. There is nothing unchristlike in God. We could say it like this. Jesus did not come to change God's thoughts about us. Jesus came to change our thoughts about God. And so when we think of God as being like Jesus, naturally, when it comes to the Hebrew Bible, what you and I call the Old Testament, when it comes to the Hebrew Bible, we understand that to be Christocentric, meaning it centers on Jesus. We also understand the Hebrew Bible to be Christotelic. That is to say that all of the Old Testament has as its goal, as its end, as its purpose and design, all of that is in Jesus. Jesus is the goal, the end, the design. He's the telos. So it's a Christotelic reading of the Hebrew Bible. Maybe a helpful analogy when we think about the Old Testament and inspiration is to think about the Old Testament when it comes to revelation and inspiration. Think about the Old Testament like a dark, shadowy, midnight sky. There's light, but there's a lot of darkness and shadow. Maybe every once in a while, like in Psalm 23, a cloud moves and you can see the moon a little more clearly. So there's a little more light. Still, lots of shadow. We see in the Hebrew Bible God, but very dimly. But when we come to Jesus, He reveals God like a noonday sun. There is brilliance. There is light. There is no darkness. So the idea is that we want to bring the light of Christ. We want to bring our rabbi with us to every text in the Hebrew Bible. And realize when you feel that tension between this depiction of God as commanding genocide and things like that, when we see that God and then we see Jesus, we realize the truth is in Jesus Christ. And this is why He will say things like, "You have heard it said, but I am telling you," things like that. It is the Anabaptist understanding, or an Anabaptist understanding. I'm not pretending to speak for all Anabaptists. If you've met one Anabaptist, you've met one Anabaptist. But from this Anabaptist perspective, the purpose of the Bible is to bring us to Jesus. It is an aid to help us follow Him. That's what it's about. Some have likened it, the Hebrew Bible, to John the Baptist, that it is pointing us to Christ. And this is my understanding of all Scripture, both Old and New. It is a tool. It is a means, not an ends. And it is designed to bring us to Jesus. And this is exactly how Jesus understands Scripture. I'm not offering you something that doesn't come from Jesus Himself. This is how Jesus read His Bible. And it's how we should read ours. Jesus says to the Pharisees, "You search the Scriptures, for in them you think you have life, but these Scriptures are pointing to me. And so you must come to me to have that life." And so this is the first attraction and distinction of Anabaptism that I would like to talk about. It is Jesus-centered, thoroughly. Okay, well, that's all for now. Leave a comment or question and join the conversation. Until next time, show the world a Jesus-looking God.